thank you very much for coming on today. I appreciate it.
Sure, bud. Yeah. Absolutely, man.
And to introduce you, this is Jimmy DiResta here. Thank you for coming on.
Sure, bud.
And most of the world knows you under the title Maker, which includes, it's an umbrella term, meaning, let's say, maybe fabricator, welder, woodworker.
For years, my tax return said artist. It probably still does. I don't look anymore.
Nice.
I have people that do that for me. But for years, I've had the same tax guy for about 25 years. He was a friend early on, and then he started doing my taxes. My tax return always listed my occupation as artist inventor.
Okay. All right. So artist, inventor, podcaster, videographer, editor.
Yeah.
A lot. It's a lot of things that you're doing. And while many people like to mess around in their garage or their shop, a lot of people know you from this work because you film this and put it on the internet.
Yep. I started doing that. I did a few TV shows early on. My brother was an actor comedian that got some traction in LA, I guess around late 90s, early 2000s.
Yep.
And he invited me out to LA to help him shoot a concept.
Yep.
And in the process of shooting the concept and trying to pitch the idea, the executive producer at the company that ended up making the show was like, hey, why don't you just get on camera with him? Because I was just trying to be a producer on the show. So that's how I got my first on-camera work, just being on a show that I helped develop with my brother. And then, somebody over me, smarter than me, with better vision than me said, hey, why don't you get on camera? I was like, oh, really? So do you have a problem with that? I was like, no. He's like, okay, then get in there.
Good.
And that's how that started.
And got on camera, you did. And then you started producing your own videos. You put them up on YouTube. Yeah. And as of today, you have 1.9 million subscribers and almost 360 million views from the work that you've put up.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's crazy. And
it is very impressive, as is the content.
Thank you.
So when you started putting these videos out, I mean, did you even have the suspicion that, this could take off in the capacity that it has?
I saw there was lots of, there was always Colin Furze and Matthias Wendell, guys like that are, just incredible maker. And then you have Mark Roper, who's just obviously killing it. And now you have Stuff Made Here, who's just unbelievably off the charts, all these guys that are, either my contemporaries or that are somewhat newer that are just absolutely killing it. And they inspire me every day. But when I started, I guess I was looking at Matthias the most. Matthias Wendell? He does wooden gears. His name of his company is woodengears.ca.
The wooden gears aspect sounds familiar. I'm sure I've probably seen
he's
it.
He's like a little nebbishy German designer. He's like a little nerdy and introverted, and he's like a bit snarky. He just took a stab at me making fun of my ice pick a couple weeks ago.
I know. He makes his own power tools.
He makes everything himself. He has to prove to the world that he doesn't need anybody's help.
He sprays them all the same color as the station wagon from Family Vacation. Everything in the shop. He's like, I want it that color. All right, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so he was on YouTube. He inspired me, and we ultimately. It was a big day in my life when he acknowledged me, because I was like, "Whoa, this is the guy. This is like one of the few reasons." Him and Steve Ramsey, woodworking for Mere Mortals, who's always out there doing stuff, and then of course the Wood Whisperer, who was out there, and these guys all came before me and inspired me to give it a shot.
Yeah, Laura Kampf was the first person in this whole world that kind of sucked me into it, and then I've just been
Laura's incredible.
It's not only is her work very impressive, but her video skill and producing aesthetic. She's extremely talented. It's a
unique style. Laura's amazing. She's just incredible, and she's a good friend, and we've had some pretty good intellectual conversations that stick with me. She's great.
Delve into your history a little bit. I tried to do a little bit of background research. I don't want to make you repeat yourself too much because you've told your story quite a few times, but
it always comes out a little different. So
in summary, originally from Long Island.
I grew up in Long Island.
Father had a shop, passed down both skills and tools to you and your siblings, all of which...
my dad's still alive. So my parents got divorced in 1980, and when my dad had to leave the house to go live in his own house, he said to me, I was 13 at the time, he goes, look, I want to make sure, he goes, you're budding young your skills are budding, and I was going to say you're a budding young maker. That wasn't a term at the time.
Yeah. The hashtag hadn't circulated around at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you told somebody I'm a maker, they would assume you're making poop in your pants. Right. I'm a maker.
Yeah.
Getting in your pants right now? What the fuck are you talking about? So, so I was a budding young maker without that phrase. And my dad said, you need to keep these tools. I'll give you an edited version of what's here, and I'll buy my new tools. I'll buy my own new tools. I want to see you keep making stuff. So, I mean, to my dad's credit, it was amazing. He's like, I'm not going to take the shop away from him, because even my brother John and I were both using that shop to earn money at the time.
Okay.
Even as 13 years, I was making things to sell.
All right. So, I mean, you were functionally working in a shop with your family early on, and then, obviously right now you just fired off the whole list of, YouTube creators that are doing the same work.
Yeah.
Have you intentionally kind of sought out these people and kind of paired yourself with them as you've moved through, or have you just continued doing your own work?
I think the fans have dictated the groups of people. I was thinking about this today, and how, like, me, Bob, and Dave do our podcast together, Bob Claggett and Dave Picciuto.
Yeah.
I like to make stuff and make something. That's what their brands are. The fans pushed us together to do our podcast. The fans, Jeff Duro, who's a fan of everybody's, was like, we were all in a comment section in a Facebook post from 6 years ago. Yeah. And Jeff Duro said in the comment section, it would be great to see you three guys do a podcast together. And all the other commenters like, that's a great idea. Oh my God. Yep. Tell us when the first episode is. And then the little post got a little bit of heat at the time. And then me, Bob, and Dave talked to each other all privately, and we never did before that. Yeah. But we talked in the comment section. We actually did speak in person on the phone. We're like, you want to try this? Let's give it a shot. And I remember I was driving between Knoxville and Nashville on Highway 40 when I was having that phone call with them. I always remember the first episode of making it. Yep. The conversation started when I was driving on the highway in Tennessee. Anyway, long story short, we ended up doing that podcast, and that was totally fan manipulated in a good way. And then my group of friends, like for instance, that consists of like Izzy Swan and Laura Kampf and Ben Ueda, all these people. We all kind of like came together like because of the fandom, I think.
Yep.
It's like the fans like, oh man, this reminds me of like something that Laura has done. And I'm like, who's Laura? Oh, at the time when I heard about Laura, she had only had a vlog and not a video series at the time. And, she started doing a video series, and we became fast friends. And so it's really great, because then there's like, I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough to be in a small little group of woodworkers that I'm kind of friends with, that, I'm in all these Venn diagrams that cross over, but not everybody's in everything. So I'm in the machinist group. Yeah. I'm in the old scrappy metal group of guys that like recover things from like farm fields. I'm in, a very, very tiny, small group of printers. Yeah. They all think I'm a shitty printer, but they like the fact that I promote it and that I promote that concept. I'm with the group of guys that are just generalized makers, like in the Maker magazine community. Obviously, it's probably my biggest community. I'm in a group of welders and fabricators that do plasma cutting, metal fabrication, and welding. And the welding group and the machining group aren't exactly the same. They're slightly different. I'm a huge fan of this old Tony, who's been a big inspiration to me. You got to check out this old Tony. He's like unbelievably intelligent, funny, and skilled. Like
the heavy Boston accent guy. Or is that no? I think it was someone else. I'm thinking,
This old. You're thinking of the guy that says "Be a man." That guy.
Maybe I don't know.
That's it. That you would know that if that's an Instagram guy. He says "Be a man." He's like, don't wear safety glasses. Get a metal shard in your eye and go blind. Be a man. That's that guy.
I can imagine that, but no, I can't. I can't say I've definitely seen it, but I can imagine the person.
Oh, but this old Tony is he's an American who does videos in his shop. They're like very, very stylized, very minimalistic. And he has a great voice, and does really good, clear, crystal clear audio voiceovers of what he does. And anyway, what he does is pretty amazing. Machinist, all machining. So I'm fortunate enough to cross over into all these various different groups.
Yeah.
And, it's funny how groups of friends, it's almost like like I'm a big fan of comedy, and I know you've had some comedians on your show.
This is primarily a comedian podcast because I've been doing stand up for a few years. So then it's
right on.
Yeah. Early episodes were all the comics that I was, doing mics with. And then in the past year, as we've been forced into Zoom, I've said, all right, well, I can't see people in person. Let me see if I can reach out to other people that I either work with or I'm a fan of. So that's
that's great. That's great.
So again, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. So I forget what I was saying, but
basically at this point you found this whole community and now you're gravitating towards each other basically, and a lot of fields are crossing over. But before pre-YouTube and pre everything else, as you come out of the shop in Long Island, you go to art school, and at some point towards the end, you take an interest in building toys for some reason.
Yeah, that's funny. So I went to art school. Well, I was going to be an architecture student.
Yeah.
In high school, I went to architecture class for 3 years. So half the day I spent in architecture instruction school. In Long Island, we had BOCES. What city are you in?
I'm in Cincinnati right now.
Okay, because then so you probably have something familiar where you spent half the day at a vocational school, whether it's like dental arts or
my high school,
auto mechanics.
I went to a public high school, and we had like a huge horticulture and vocational section that was physically part of the school. So
yeah, well, you guys promote a lot of like farming and stuff out there, in the
This
Midwest.
was in New Hampshire, so it was just a weird.
Oh,
it was a weird. Well, I mean, like in New Hampshire, you're probably going to build a house or work on a farm if you don't leave the state and go to a college. So I mean, it made sense in hindsight, but at the time.
So in Long Island, I spent. My dad forced me into doing it, which I say forced, but I wouldn't have done it if he hadn't told me.
Yeah,
he said, you obviously have a skill set in making stuff, and he's nurtured the hell out of that, which is really why I am where I am. I owe a lot of it to my dad. But he said, what about if you go to school for half the day and you take architecture? And I was like, oh, that sounds like fun. So I, from like 9th, 10th, 11th, like 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I'd spend the first half of every school day at an architecture school. And in that building, there was kids from high schools all over Long Island. Like so in my architecture class, there was kids from 10 different high schools. And just down the hall, there was auto and boat mechanics. And in that class, there was like boats hanging from slings, and kids were learning how to like fix the hull. They're all high school students. And everybody in that class were from like 10 or 15 different high schools. So it was like a learning hub for industrial vocation. And then I was also dentistry. So those were mostly girls in the dentistry class, and a couple of nerdy guys.
If they knew in high school they were going into dentistry, then that's a pretty specific group of people. But I'm guessing it probably worked out for them.
Yeah. Right. That's fun. Yeah. And so then when I got out, it was time to go to college. Yeah. I was going to go to an architecture school, but by that point I realized I was really shitty at math.
There seems to be a lot of that in architecture. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of math. And so at the time I was learning about like Warhol and Picasso and like Da Vinci and all these guys that they were just like this entities on their own. They didn't need to be defined as an architect or an artist. Of course, they were all artists, but the point I'm making is that if they wanted to design a house, all they needed was a nerdy architect to do the math. Right. They would dictate the vision.
Yep.
And also like Philip Stark and some of these crazy like outlandish guys started inspiring me to basically start thinking myself as anything I wanted to be. Yeah. Just like basically a creative director of my own vision. And when it came to the more mundane stuff, hire somebody to do it for me.
Good model.
And I didn't really have that clear vision right there and then, but I was kind of on that track, but without a definition of it. Yeah. And then so I decided to take a year out of high school and really just had no idea what I was going to do. I don't want to make it sound like I had all the intelligence there at the time. Yeah. But after some time, I decided to go back to school, and I chose art school. So I went back to School of Visual Arts. Yeah. And then while I was at the School of Visual Arts, I was learning 3D design and like prop making and product development. All under this like vague notion of like 3D illustration. Nothing was really defined in one direction or another. Right. And in my final year at school, I took a small thing called Toys and Games, and that's what led me into the toy business. That teacher, Mark said Ducati, who's still alive, and we remain friends to this day, 30 years later. Yeah. Mark said, "You're really good at making things, and you're also really good at inventing things." He says, "You should consider being in the toy business, or giving it a shot." He goes, "If it works out for you, you can make a lot of money." And so that's how I started in the toy business.
Just call it the toy business. I mean, it's kind of a deceptively simple thing, because when you, with all of the dynamics that can go into a toy between like plastics, chemistry, and designing things to move around and everything like that, like I imagine that could have become an extremely complicated field if you really wanted it to be.
Well, it's like I specialized in doing like these little impulse items, like Gurgling Guts was a toy that I invented. It's like a squishy ball inside of a skin. Blood sucks and spits on the ball inside. It's called Gurgling Guts. I developed a lot of like gross, squishy toys like that. So I was in that category, but occasionally I would be hired to help develop somebody else's product.
Yeah.
And so they'd be like, "Hey, I have this thing that does this when you flick and push on this button." So I started really getting more and more exercise, mechanical, electric engineering stuff, because I was just taking in whatever projects were afforded to me. So people would just say, "Hey, can you make this thing for me?" Or, "I have this idea on paper. Can you figure out how to make it?" And then that really started exercising my brain and my inventive skills and things that I otherwise wouldn't have naturally gravitated towards, because,
right.
I would just, if it wasn't there, I wasn't thinking. I was thinking of what was in front of me at the time, kind of.
Was one of those tools that you worked on called the Bedazzler?
I did work on the Bedazzler, absolutely.
Did you ever have a point in your toy making career when you were just like, how the hell am I going to top the Bedazzler?
Well, the funny thing was I improved the Bedazzler. So the Bedazzler was like this like elbow shaped thing that like punched rivets through
I
denim.
was young enough to where like they tried to market the commercials for, like, I remember Bedazzler commercials probably on like Nickelodeon or something, wherever they put them out.
Yeah. So the Bedazzler was like available like direct marketing from a company, but then the company I worked for licensed the Bedazzler to sell it into the toy stores.
Okay.
So what we made was only available in the toy stores. So we would basically took their model that they manufactured, and we made our own tooling for it. It looked exactly the same. Yeah. And we made it in like bright colors like purple and like colors for like crafting, and mostly girls gravitated towards it. So we made them in pink and purple and metallic colors. And then when I came along, they said, "How can we improve this?" I said, "Well, if you want to put it in the middle of a jacket, you got to bunch the whole thing up inside the elbow of the machine." And I say machine, it was just like a plastic stapler,
plastic
basically.
form. Yeah.
And I said, "What if we just made the base and the top in two independent parts, and you put your bottom in and you put your top in the middle of the jacket, or in the middle of a blanket, for instance, and you could just feel one under the other, in like they kind of fit together through the fabric, and then you push it." And so my big invention to the Bedazzler was to get rid of the elbow and just get rid of the hinge. And so you have the top and bottom, just like a bottom of the mushroom and the top of the mushroom, and you find them together through the fabric, and you just give it a shove because it kind of has like a positive fit. And then you set the prongs on the thing. In all actuality, you don't need the Bedazzler. You end up fiddling with your fingers and stabbing your fucking fingertips trying to get the thing to sit into the top.
It's a sparkly thumbtack that you're pushing through.
Yeah. And then all you really need is to just push the Bedazzler into the fabric, turn it over, and with like a spoon, just push all the prongs over.
Okay.
That's really all it is. It's like, the Bedazzler really isn't half as important as all the findings that you buy and stick in it.
Okay. Well, do you think your Bedazzler work influenced any of your textile or faded denim jacket work today?
Yeah, of course.
Cool, man.
I started playing with a sewing machine around that same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You transitioned from toys to TV around like the mid 2000s or so.
Yeah, well, my very first TV appearance was with my brother John, who's a comedian and an actor. He got me involved in this TV show called Trash to Cash. Well, we didn't know what the name was at the time. We called it Trash to Cash, I think, was the name my brother came up with. But when we realized the trademark wasn't available, they changed the name of the show to Trash to Cash with John DiResta. And now that's, even though it's the same name, but with a little additive, takes it out of the trademark dispute. And so Trash to Cash with John DiResta was a show that he came up with where we find garbage and make it into stuff. Yep. And then we made a pitch tape. I did the production on the tape and the behind the scenes editing and stuff and the direction. And then when we showed it around, it got picked up by a Fox affiliate, a Fox production company that put it on FX Network. And then we got a new production company came in. It was the first, I was learning about all this shit at that time.
Right.
So this production company came in and they basically they re-engineered the concept to like us picking garbage and solving a problem with it.
Right.
Like this guy, and it was like a very farcical, but it was funny. And everybody got on the bus because they're like, all right, this is a total bullshit show, but let's get on the bus because this is fun.
Yeah.
So everybody suspended belief. It was almost like a cartoon. Like the pilot, the pilot episode. Yeah. The pilot episode was this guy wanted to have a bachelor party for his best buddy, but nobody had any money.
Okay.
So like, all right, how much money do you have? And he's like, we got $15. So like, okay, so we bought a case of beer with the $15, and then we just went driving around picking garbage. Yeah. And we picked all this garbage, and we might have went to a couple of antiques. So everything was planted, and then we ended up with like a mannequin, a bunch of wood, some felt, and a big pole. So we made a stripper pole, which was ridiculous, and they hired this super hot girl to come be the stripper, and then we made a couple of gambling tables to make it seem like it was a casino stripper atmosphere. Okay. And we had this mannequin, and in the mannequin, we got a beer bong, and I re-plumbed the mannequin so that beer came out of one of the nipples if you push the other nipple. So you push in one nipple and beer comes out of the other nipple. It was all this stupid shit that wouldn't fly on TV today.
Right. And this was on FX network. This wasn't even Spike TV.
Right. So that was the pilot episode we did. So every week we had to like solve somebody's money woes. Yeah. Like the Pimp Your Ride, the Cadillac was before Pimp My Ride. And, a few people like actually admit like, yeah, we invented Pimp My Ride, but we didn't know it at the time.
Right. You made one episode of it and then they just took your episode and made it into a show. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was a great episode where this kid had no money. And so he's like, I have this junky car. And in TV land, in real TV world, we found a $2,000 Cadillac, told the kid, this is your pay for the episode. Yeah. And he's like, I don't care. I just want to be on. So we took the Cadillac and it was in perfect condition, 1975 Coupe de Ville. We took it back to the shop. I painted one fender gray to make it look like it had been repaired. And we took the headlight rims off, and we took the hubcaps off and just to make it look like it was janked out. And then he's like, yeah, this is my Cadillac. It's kind of shitty looking. And so we took it and we turned it into a pimped out Cadillac. We cut the roof off, made it convertible.
So in the span of 8 years, you get 4 television shows on TV.
Yeah, which, it's pretty impossible.
No one will probably ever do that again. But
people do it all the time. But the funny thing is I got those 4 or 5 shows on, and there was other stuff that didn't actually make it to the air. But we sold those shows, and nobody knows about them at all. Well, I'm right now. We're doing a TV production right now, and I don't want to publish the name of the production company or the network, but it's the network everybody wants to be on. I'll put it to that wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right?
Yeah.
And even these people are like, so are you excited to be on TV? I'm like, I've done this fucking 18 times already. Right. Like,
well, I mean,
what? I'm like, nobody even fucking knows because no one's paying attention.
Right. Well, I mean, your brother specifically being in the comedy field before these get on TV. I mean, most. Mm-hmm. Until maybe 5-8 years ago, like the general path was like, okay, you're a comic, you get on late night and you do a festival or two, and then time to pitch your sitcom, and then you have 10 pilots that don't get bought or one of them that works, and then you ride that out. But the fact that you got 4 different groups of people to be like, yeah, sure, let's make a season, not just a pilot of this, even if it's short-lived. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad you noticed that because, there's some people in my thing like, oh, you must be really frustrated because it's, nothing's worked. I'm like, I've gotten so much further than 100% of everybody else. So I'm super happy that I keep getting these feathers in my cap.
Right. No, the fact that 4 different groups were like, yeah, sure, we'll do. I mean, it's very uncommon, and it's very unlikely that many people will get 4 chances at some point in the future.
And now we're in number 5 right now. This is just my brother's not involved in this project, unfortunately, but it's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. Thank you.
And all of these shows came out on either FX or kind of like the Discovery umbrella. Like
we did we did I did a show on Discovery, well in order of what we sold. The FX network, then HGTV, then the DIY network was another show, and then Discovery Channel, and now the most sought after
the big
pay service
the big
everybody wants to be involved in.
Yeah.
And
with all of those networks, did you ever get to meet either the Property Brothers or Paul Sr. from American Chopper?
Oh, and then I'm also on NBC as like a guest on the
your other active show, which
I didn't make or create, so that's why I'm just I'm like basically a hired gun, but I'm obviously happy to be involved with that. I never met Paul Sr., but a lot of the people that worked on Dirty Money ended up going to work on the Paul Sr. Jr.
like as crew and camera people like
so
that.
There's like two sound guys, two produce, they had like the angry person, the angry father, and the son both had their own production teams. Yeah. And you were either team junior or team senior, literally, like they weren't allowed to cross pollinate.
Yeah.
I was told.
I remember they published on that show at one point, cause it came back like years after I was watching it. They had something out and it was, there was like a non-compete clause that they were like actively working out through the show and everything. And I was like, this show has changed since I stopped watching it. Like, what happened? But
even though they live right near me. I mean, like they're only like
it's upstate,
45, 50 miles from here. And I've never met them. And I don't even know anybody that knows them. It's crazy.
Yeah,
but you can't, everybody always uses them as a punchline, but you can't argue with the success of that show,
I frankly was a fan of it because apparently a bunch of adults watched it, but like when the first Jesse James specials came out, I was like an early teenager and I thought that was like the coolest thing that had ever been put on TV. And
everybody, even with Jesse James and the Chopper people, they were a huge part of like where I am now. I totally give them 100% of the credit. If it wasn't for Jesse James, I don't think I'd have a career right now.
No one else was standing inside of their own metal fabrication shop on Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
Getting millions of people being like, I want to build something like this guy did it. So, I mean,
100%, and I don't think, Jesse James kind of has painted himself into his own corner, with his attitude and, his, I met a lot of people that don't necessarily love him, but, despite that, he's done a lot for this, this career that I'm in. Okay?
If you ignore everything other than Jesse James's work, he is one of the most incredible human beings alive. I mean, it is.
Yeah, no doubt. His work, his stuff is beautiful.
Whatever his firearms company that he puts out. I mean, even as a person that doesn't really get psyched up about AR-15s and everything. I mean, the fact that someone is forging Damascus into stocks and turning it into artwork like that. I mean, it's one of the only.
The one thing Jesse James, he's inspired me. He's inspired me into being like, if you're going to make something, like it should be like substantial and long lasting. And not all my projects are like that. I do kind of shit just to show off a set of skills. Might be like a sewn project, like the handy bags I made recently. But, every once in a while I'll make something like, I'm always proud of my cannons because they were all fully machined and, the cannons that I made. And there's a couple of other projects. But, like you think in terms of like Jesse James makes stuff that, kind of has like a sustainability as an object,
I don't know, one thing I didn't know until a few years ago was I watched some interview he did where he talked about the Walmart deal that he did like after the specials came out and something. He said every single one of his business advisors told him not to go into that store and it would ruin him. And he was the highest selling.
I know from a lot of people he made the most money there of anything he's ever done.
He was the highest selling brand of all time at that place. I mean, he does certainly have a firm understanding of quite a few things, but yeah.
What I've come to learn, and like, obviously I don't have the career Jesse James has, but in my varied experience, I get nervous sometimes when I'll take on like even just a stupid advertisement or an associate. As long as you deal with like people that are like in generally good-hearted people and companies that are good-hearted companies, but you always do this thing like for instance, I was real nervous to do gaming ads, which I probably won't do anymore because it just does not fit my brand at all. Like battle tank phone ads. Like I did a couple of these, like, it just doesn't suit my brand at all. But, like the point I was going to make is I find that when, people are like, oh, don't do that, it's going to ruin your career. You know what it is? It might not work out, but it's not going to ruin your career. If you're good-hearted and well-intended, you'll just get past the bump in the road of the bad decision,
It seems like
as long as you deal with like upscale good people, you don't want to like deal with degenerates and racists. You just want to deal with good-hearted people. And like for me doing like video game ad, it just wasn't the best decision. It was good money, and I joke when people pick on me about it. I'm like, hey, it was like the fastest $10,000 I ever made in my life. I'll never do it again because it was hokey as hell, but that's that.
I don't know what the crossover is between gaming teenagers and kids that are going out to their shop, but someone thought it might exist. So,
well, you know what? You'd be surprised because now at my age, I'm 54 years old. I meet people that are like 47, and they spent a huge chunk of their life in front of a game. I never did it. I never even spent 1 second in front of a TV monitor playing a game. But people that are just like 6 or 7 years younger than me, literally spent their entire youth and still do. Like when I sit down at the end of the day and like watch the news on YouTube, there are guys that are like almost 50 that sit down and play. I don't know. I can't even think of a good example of a name to make a joke about, but they'll sit down and like pull out the game controller, and I'll be like, okay. I guess.
I was very fortunate that for some reason, despite playing them a lot as a kid, and for some reason I'm just very bad at video games, and I just decided to not be bad at them anymore. So I put them away, and it was a real double-edged sword coming through early high school. But look at me now.
Yeah. See, I remember. I'll tell you a funny story. I was walking home from high school with Mark Jabrendis, a friend of mine who's exactly my age. And we left middle school. This must have been like 1982. And we're walking down Irving Place, and he jumped in front of me and he goes, "It's mine." And he like picked up a $20 bill that was like blowing across our path. Yep. And we went to the candy store, and he got $20 worth of quarters and sat in front of Mrs. Pac-Man for the next like 4 hours and put every quarter of Mrs. Pac-Man. And I thought to myself, it's like, wow, if I had $20, I certainly wouldn't spend it on Mrs. Pac-Man. Wow. And I think of that all the time when it comes to video games. But that's what he wanted to do with his $20 that he found blowing in the wind.
Yeah, I mean that's one. That's I one probably way to do an afternoon. Yeah.
And that day, I'm sure of it. I must have went home and used the bandsaw for a couple of hours at one point because that's what I did for a living at the time. Yeah. Well, I was always working on the bandsaw from a young age. So.
Well, different folks,
Yeah. So yeah.
All right. So while you're in the middle of getting these TV shows out, you start filming things yourself, and you start teaching yourself.
Well, it's funny. I was working. The way we sold all the shows that me and my brother, those 4 shows that you're talking about. Yeah. I always shot and made the pitch ourselves without a production company. So we always, when it comes to like TV meetings, which like kind of you're in the comedian world, you guys live for like pitch meetings and like meeting with like, you and Barry Katz going into the pitch room together, I never did any of that. I would always just make a video. Me and my brother would agree it's good enough. And then we'd start sending it out through his manager, and then his manager would get the video clip and then start saying, this was before YouTube. And then I remember when YouTube came about in 2006, I'm like, oh, this makes life easy because I could just put the video clip on there and then email, because there was always a problem. It's like the video didn't come through. It's too big, pixelated, too small, pixelated. And so that was always a pain in the ass. And then we'd just like maybe FedEx a videotape here or there. But then when I started putting the pitches on YouTube and showing them around and just showing the links around, and they weren't even private, but nobody was looking at me, so nobody even looked or cared.
Right.
So nobody,
well, I mean, at that
if you
point,
don't know to look down that, nobody was paying attention.
At that point in YouTube, if it wasn't a funny cat, I mean, good luck.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't a cat playing the piano. Nobody looked at it. Yeah. And so I was getting good at editing while I was developing these concepts. I mean, the dirty money, the trash to cash thing that I did with my brother was like a big, like, okay, so if we keep playing in this direction, let's see what else we can do. And I remember buying a Panasonic DVX 100, which was like the hot camera at the time. I still have it. It was the first video camera that shot in 24 frames, so it looked like film.
Oh, it was the first digital that was really built.
Looked like film. Yeah. Yeah, it had like the grainy film quality. And I put this $3,500. I put it on a credit card. I didn't have a dime to my name. I mean, every month all I had to worry about was coming up with $1,100 for rent and a couple of credit card payments. And so I bought that camera on a credit card, and we shot Lord of the Fleas on that. And that was the what ultimately became Dirty Money 5 years later. And then when we did the Discovery Dirty Money show, the show came and went so quick. I was like, screw everybody on TV. I'm just going to do my own production. Because every idea I had to like, well, how can it shoot a rocket? Can we set it on fire in a clear plastic box? Everybody just wanted to do what Mythbusters was doing. And I was like, I think people are more interested in just how the fucking table saw cuts through wood, or how,
It is
how this thing connects to that, and how, the process of making anything. I just thought, for me as a kid, watching Sesame Street and going into the factory cannery or the bottle company, watching that, the factory process was always super fun for me. It was like my favorite part of Sesame Street.
All right. Yeah, that was a big question that I had for you, because I mean, even your very first video that you still have up there, it's the same format that you've been putting out, where it's, a process video in, super dialed up speed, so you can see most of what's going on. And it's you making a chair that is shaped like a foot. And
right. That was,
I don't even know. I don't even know what obviously, now it's been tested thousands of times between you and everyone that's picked up your format. But I mean, that was your inspiration for that format, was watching kind of like process videos or whatever.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. Yep. I've only told this a couple times, but my left foot video was me just really experimenting for the first time. It was a pitch. It was me making a pitch for something that wasn't like a regular show.
Okay.
So the my left foot video was a video where I quickly make this thing that looks like a foot that I sit in.
Yeah.
It was like one of the first things I made in my basement shop. That's my basement shop that I went on to film all my other videos in. And you can see how it fills up over 10 years. But in that episode, or that very first episode that I shot, I was trying to do the Simpsons model. Now, I don't know how much you know about the Simpsons. Do you know where the Simpsons started?
I mean,
this is a deep dive.
You're talking about their
Simpsons
animation style, or what do you mean?
So you don't know the answer. So the Simpsons, there was a comedian named Tracy Ullman. Do you know who that is? Because she's so far out of the ether right now. Tracy Ullman's a funny British comedian that kind of had like, she was like the woman of 1,000 faces. Look her up. Tracy Ullman. She's very funny.
Okay.
She was a comedian that could play any character. She played Americans, Australians. She even did blackface, I'm sure. She did, I think she might have done Whoopi Goldberg. She was like, what do you call it? A chameleon. She could change into any person. And so she did the Tracy Ullman show, which she got like her own variety show. So it was a skit show. And Matt Groening did little cartoons in and out of commercials of the Simpson family. So we'll be right back, man. And it was Bart Simpson and the Simpson family. Yep. And people were like, who are these people? We need to know more about them. I'm sure Matt Groening had it all figured out, but that was his first way to publish this concept, was on the Tracy Ullman show as an interstitial coming in and out of commercials.
Okay.
And then this was probably 83, 4. And then The Simpsons was born shortly thereafter. Yep. And, I guess I was in art school when The Simpsons was like a huge thing. So that was like in the mid to late 80s. So anyway, I was trying to like emulate that thing, and I was trying to sell the concept of me making super fast videos. So within like a 30-second video, you watch something get built. I was trying to sell it to MTV, and I had a producer that worked at MTV. I was like, would you please show these videos of me making things really fast to people at MTV and MTV and VH1? And they were like, yeah. You might be able to pull that off with Vice now, because they're still willing. I actually interviewed with Vice to do that same thing with Vice.
Yeah, because they're willing to get more crazy. But
So one of the after we did Trash to Cash, then we did Hammered on HGTV, and I made a lot of friends, behind the scenes in the production aspect of that show. And one of the cameramen ended up working at Vice. And he invited me in to do an interview Vice was going to do a segment on people that make stuff. And this was before the maker movement. This was in like 85.
Yeah.
2005, 2007, around that time.
Yep.
And that didn't work out. I remember going to Vice and everybody was just so fucking cool. They were like,
everyone there is 19 and
what are you like? What are you like, 30? Yeah. What are you doing here?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think things worked out.
Old guy here to see you. Yeah. How old are you? 31.
Everyone is going through the hallways on Razor scooters for no reason.
Exactly.
Things ultimately worked out. You basically say, all right, well, let's transition out of this TV. I'm going to upload everything on YouTube, and I'm going to start hitting it pretty heavy. And that was close to 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think my first video I published was like October of 2012, I think.
Okay.
That's me making like a keychain clip.
All right.
something like that.
You're doing all of this in a basement in the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
Outside looking in seems like arguably the worst place on the planet to do these things. It's
possibly
the most expensive real estate that you can find. It's you're in a basement with a sidewalk entrance, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So moving 300-pound tools up and down that and sheets of plywood doesn't seem like a great time, if I had to guess.
It was a pain in the ass.
Yep.
Well, I tell you, so in 2004, I bought the house I'm sitting in right now.
Okay.
A lot of people have this misconception that I bought this house with YouTube money. And they also think that I got a young girlfriend because of YouTube. I had the young girlfriend before I started YouTube, and I had this house before I started YouTube.
Yeah.
And so...
Got that with TV money. Thank you, Discovery.
Yeah. It's funny because those shows were so not a hit that, like, when I tell people that I was on TV, they're like, wait a minute, you were on what? How were you on?
I know I saw part of an episode of one of these shows because I remember, like, it must have been early high school. Like, I don't know, I flipped the Discovery and I was like, there are two guys and they're trying to buy stuff and sell it at a flea market or something. And I vaguely remember this. And I think part of it was like a guitar that looked like a saw blade or something.
That's right. That was episode 1 of Dirty Money. Yeah.
Okay. So at some point...
I argued with the producers because they're like, wait, it looks like a banjo. Can we change? I'm like, I'm not fucking changing it.
My job is to suggest that you do something different. So can you do that? Yeah, so I do remember that at some point in my life, but you're doing that while you're living in New York and you're working under, I mean, what even was the building in New York where you're doing that? Was it just like an apartment or were you under like a butcher shop?
It was, so my apartment in New York is part of, and I just agreed to move out of it. So I've finally given up my apartment since 2008 because I never go there anymore, and COVID changed the landscape completely. So I'm going to get out of there.
Yeah.
But the building that I have my apartment in is a network of 40 to 45 buildings. And it's a mutual housing association where, like, they basically try and benefit the neighborhood to keep good people there. They're not just trying to price gouge and get as much as they can from, like fancy school college students or, people that are rich, So there's a nice ethnic mix of people in all of the buildings, various income levels. And my buddy who rented the storefront to put his doctors on, he's kind of like he called it like combat zone doctor. He called it like a MASH unit, where he was like, he really was more worried about the neighborhood than less about making money. Okay. So he was like a real neighborhood doctor. So Dave's office was in that building. And then we went down, he just got the storefront, still very standard, very middle pricing. They didn't charge, because even though he was a doctor, he wasn't the type of doctor that charged a lot of money. Yeah. He mostly saw everybody for free. So they gave him a good rent because they saw that in him, that, because he was community based. And so me and Dave he goes, check out the space it comes with. I'm like, okay. So we went in the basement of the building, and he had the basement had, like, I always called it, it's like a crypt. It's like an Egyptian crypt because there's all these various rooms. Yeah. And he had one of the rooms with a cage on the door locked. And he's like, this whole room comes with the storefront. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is like another 400 square feet, 500 square foot room that you could put a workshop in. And then we looked around, and I was like, what about all these other rooms? They were like bone empty, bone dry, nothing in them at all. And he's like, I don't know. Ask Mary. She was the woman in charge of the building because I was friends with her too. So I said to Mary, I was like, can I rent the one room across from Dave? And she's like, yeah, don't worry. Let's figure it out. And she gave me that room for $400 a month. And I rented that room in 2004, I think, 2004. So I started working I bought this house around the same time, but to come work here was just so because it's 140 miles from New York. Yeah. I bought the house as an investment. Like, the house basically sat empty 90% of the time because I just didn't have the wherewithal to come up here. I just said, I'll keep paying for it. Eventually we Airbnb'd it with the help of my girlfriend. So we made it, it was a little bit of an investment, but when I first bought it, I almost didn't know what the hell I was going to do with it. Yeah. So I then, also I was kind of like, shit, I got to work harder to pay for my new mortgage. And so I got that store, I got that shop in this. Prior to that, I had like a little storefront shop that I gave up because it was too small. And then I started working out of that basement shop, and it just grew from there. Like one of the first things I did was that My Left Foot video down there. And slowly, and then I started getting more and more work in the neighborhood. It's the type of thing I didn't solicit early on. I was mostly doing toy business stuff. But when I started soliciting like bar and restaurant work, like making tables and chairs and that type of stuff, that shop became invaluable to me. It's like where I do all my work. And then we shot a couple of pitches down there. The pitch for Dirty Money, which is on my website, was like one of the first things we shot down there. We also shot the pitch for, actually the first thing we shot down there was the pitch for Making It with John and Jimmy, which is on my website. That became Hammered.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, basically became like a little art studio, little fun studio. And I finally gave it up in 2017. So I had all those years.
I mean, how long were you in Lower East Side?
Well, I only just now finally gave up my apartment. I moved there in 93. 92.
How insanely different is that area from when you moved in? I mean, that
there's a funny video if you can Google, if you feel like Googling, it's a really funny. A guy named Clayton used to record all the Lower East Side all the time. Clayton, I forget his last name, but Clayton, he has like the biggest document of the Lower East Side as far as VHS tapes and photography.
Clayton Patterson.
Yep, that's him. And the night that GG Allin died, he was kicked out of a show at the gas station, which was directly across the street from my storefront workshop and my apartment house. I lived in the apartment as well. And GG Allin was kicked out of this store, out of the gas station show because he was causing a disturbance. And
naturally,
so GG Allin, it was walking around the neighborhood like half dressed, half naked, and all of his followers were following him. And Clayton was following him with a camera. And they walk up Avenue B, across 3rd Street, down Avenue A. It starts on 2nd Street, right in front of my apartment. Yep. And this was the summer after I moved there. So I was in the city that day. Yep. But one day I happened to find this. I'm like, I was there. I remember hearing about this event because the next day he died, and everyone's like, GG Allin died. I'm like, who the hell's GG Allin? I'm like, oh, that's that guy that like throws poop on people in the front row. If you don't know him, look him up. He's a crazy punk artist.
Exactly who you're talking about. And that's
and so that night, so this day he's walking around and Peyton's filming him, and they walk all around the Lower East Side. That was my neighborhood, and every storefront is shuttered on a Sunday afternoon. Now you go there, you can't park anywhere. Every store is selling. I mean, obviously, coronavirus changed a lot of that.
No, but I mean, right up until. And I'm sure in 6 months everything's going to be even more
somewhat back. Anyway, so that was my neighborhood then. That was the summer I moved there, or the summer after I moved there. So it was right in that time. And that particular evening, GG Allin overdosed at a party, and he was sitting on the couch dead for like 2 hours before someone realized maybe this is an issue. His chest isn't moving. Yeah, his chest hasn't moved, and he's starting to turn gray. So then they realized he was dead.
I think, in another thing I was listening to, you had mentioned that you had been around to catch like the Ramones coming through CBGB and a few other places in New York.
That was even before I lived in the Lower East Side, when I was in high school and just before, like while I was in art school, I would go see the Ramones all the time whenever they aired, like whenever they played in Long Island. They used to play at the Malibu nightclub in Long Island, and I'd go there all the time with my brother, John. And then we saw them at L'Amour's a few times, which was a Brooklyn rock club. Yep. And then I saw them at CB's at least one time that I could remember. And
Were you around when the Beastie Boys were coming out? And I mean,
it's funny. I remember I was my first year at art school, and the Beasties had just put out that album. Actually, it was my second year. I forget. It was like 90. It was like 84 or 85 when they put out that first album of like the airplane crashed into a wall.
Yeah.
And that imagery kept popping up in art school. Like people were like repainting that imagery. And I thought when gigantic. I first saw the Beastie Boys, you got to fight for your right to party. Yeah. I thought they would
the dumbest
assholes.
Yeah.
3 fucking moronic assholes that like sucked. Yeah. And I was just like, these guys are like they are like totally like appropriating hip hop, and they're just making a mockery of it.
Yep.
But when I realized they were on Def Jam Records, I was like, oh, that's why they're getting a pass, because Russell Simmons is putting them up.
Yeah.
And It wasn't until like, I guess, what is the album? Paul's Boutique, maybe? Or
Paul's Boutique. And then after that was...
the one where there's like a guy hanging out a car window with a speaker.
I know what you're talking about, but...
like that album, those two albums. And then, you know, Funky Beats from Far Out Places was like an import. I'm making up the name, but it's something like that. It's Funky Beats and Far Out Sounds. It was all just musical. I really started to see them as like a genius musical group.
Yeah, I read their book 2 years ago when it came out, and that summer I spent a month on the edge of Brooklyn and Queens. So it was very, when I was going around in the daytime, I would go through that book at night, and then as I was going, you know, on the subway and going through the city, kind of try to take in stuff as I was going through, and it was just it's kind of just a weird sort of surreal experience to be there. But I mean, you were there as that was coming out, and you were in art school. Yeah,
I was right there.
You were in art school as that was happening. So I mean, that was literally taking place all around you. That's
it was taking place all around. So much cool shit was taking place around me, and I wasn't physically part of it. Like for instance, like I would see Sarah Silverman walking up and down Clinton Street.
Oh yeah,
and I knew she was a comedian, and I knew she was sort of an up and coming comedian, and I wasn't friendly with her. Mark Maron lived on 2nd Street like 2 years before I did.
Right. Well, you said your brother was a comic, and
my brother was a comedian. Yeah,
he was working with.
Still is.
But you said he was working with Barry Katz, right?
Yes, Barry Katz. Well, my brother didn't work with Barry Katz until like 2001, but Barry Katz owned the Boston Comedy Club,
right? Which is where every single one of the biggest comedians in the world in the 90s was there. Yeah.
So Barry is 60 something years old now. So the reason I bring this up is because my brother was a New York City cop, and he was doing stand up, and he used to drive all around the city doing stand up as a cop.
Yeah.
And I would meet him when I could. And this one particular night, he's like, hey, he goes, I'm working tonight. He goes, but Barry Katz's 40th birthday tonight at the Boston. He goes, if you got time, go over there. And Boston Comedy Club was like 3 blocks from where I lived.
Right.
Even where I live now. So I walked over and got into the Boston. Forget the guy's name. Lewis. I can't remember Lewis.
CK or Lewis,
not Louis CK. Louis, no, I can't remember his name. His joke was Louis something not gay, because he seemed like he was gay, and he would always have these pins made up. And he worked at the Boston, and he was always handing out, you know, come in. And his name is Louis. I want to say Louis Ferranda, but that's a different guy in the comedy business. He's a booker for, I think, Caroline's. Yeah. Louis, his last name like made a good rhythm. Louis Bump Not Gay, and that's what his pins would say, because he seemed like he was gay. So that was his big opening joke.
Okay.
Anyway, so I was friends with him at the time. So I went over there. He got me in, and I wish I could remember exactly, but I know that Patrice O'Neill went up.
Yeah.
I think Louis C.K. was there that night.
Yeah.
But I was Colin Quinn.
Yeah, all of these guys,
yeah, they were all there, and like I knew all of these guys vaguely. Like if I bumped into like I just said his name,
like Bill Burr was there a lot at that point.
See, I never knew Bill Burr, but he was there all the time. I remember one night I was in front of the Boston Comedy Club hanging out with Lewis on a summer night. And Dave Chappelle couldn't get a cab because cabs don't pick up African Americans in New York at the time.
In the
and
90s,
so Todd Barry stepped out into the street, hailed a cab for him, and Todd was like, "Could you, these motherfuckers?" And he stepped in the street, hailed a cab, opened the door, and then Dave Chappelle got in,
which is
and the cop and the guy driving the cab was like, "Oh, blah, 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 blah," and then he closed the door and he said, "Just drive," you know, but. I was standing there for that. I mean, it's amazing that, you know, these weird memories, like.
Well, it's insane that all of those people were at that place at that time, and almost
you could appreciate it because you're a comedian. Yeah.
Well, it's because it's you know, it's not much like we were saying earlier on, where like, there probably aren't going to be people that get 4 shows to air in the future. Like there probably isn't going to be a group of comedians that were all standing there in their 20s, not realizing that in 20 years they were going to be the top of every network and selling the largest rooms that anyone had ever done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, It's
and
it's
what's his name
insane
was
to be around.
always so funny. I still go to the I haven't been there in a while because of COVID, and they're only just opened up again. But the Comedy Cellar is like right around the block from the Boston, and the Comedy Cellar was such an amazing place to go to. And there was a lull in activity at the Comedy Cellar when you used to be able to go there, and I would go there with my brother, and he would get on stage, and it would just be like an open mic. You can't get in the Comedy Cellar now at any given time.
It's sold out every night. Yeah.
Every single show is sold out every single night, always. You can't even like make a reservation. We always would get in, just go to like the call waiting line for people that don't show up for the reservation. That's how we would get in.
Yeah.
And, it was a 50-50 shot that somebody wouldn't come and we get in. That's how I would go. Like we never, because to try and make to book a table there or a seat, you have to do it like 2 weeks in advance or 3 weeks in advance.
Yeah.
And we would just like on a whim go, hey, let's walk to the Comedy Cellar, me and Taylor. And we'd walk over and just wait in the line. And then eventually we'd get in, or we wouldn't. And we'd just go get a dinner and go back home.
Yeah.
So, but I saw Amy Schumer there, Neil Brennan, and
it's
Fuqua. It's crazy. There's so many good comedians there.
Yeah, and I mean that place is still one of the centers of the universe for stand-up, and they're just barely opening back up. So I'm sure.
Yeah.
So
like I said, I was at the crossroads of all this great stuff happening, and I wasn't physically connected to all these guys, but I got a chance to see them with my own. Like I was in a green room with Tracy, with Patrice O'Neill and Colin Quinn, like goofing off, like the way you hear. And this was before Tough Crowd started.
Yeah. So
these is all like, so that green room activity, because I was just there with my brother, and like I just kept my mouth shut. And a funny moment in time.
It's a good idea when Patrice is around because
So one particular night at Caroline's Comedy Club in the green room, Colin Quinn was going to be there, and my ex-girlfriend, this girl Heather says to me, she's like, "You going to go see Colin Quinn is going to be at the show tonight?" I said, "I think so." John said he was going to be there. She's like, "Could you tell Colin Quinn, like, could you give him my number so that he and I could be friends?" And I was like, "Sure." I'm not the jealous type, and I knew she wasn't going to try and sleep with him. So then it turns out, by weird circumstance, we're all in the green room hanging out. It's me, my brother, Colin Quinn, Patrice O'Neill, and like 4 other comedians who I can't remember. Yeah. Oh, and Louis Black. I've hung out with Louis Black.
Yeah.
I was at Louis Black's 40th birthday party too. And he would never remember me. I was just another guy in the audience. I was just like a hanger-on for a comedian. Like, how would he remember me? He wouldn't know me. He might know John, my brother. Yeah. So we were all hanging out in the green room. I don't know if Louis Black was there that night, but there was like a lull. Everybody was goofing off, and there was a lull. And I said, Colin, my girlfriend is a huge fan of yours. I said, she actually wants to be friends with you. I said, I'll give you her number if you're willing to give her a call. And forget it. It was just like, you're offering up your girlfriend like you're a pimp. The jokes just like it would not stop, and there was so many laughs.
Evening,
Even my brother was like railing the shit out of me, and I gave Colin Heather's number, and then a couple months later, I'm like, "Did you ever talk to Colin?" She's like, "Oh yeah, we're having lunch in a couple of days." I'm like,
"Yes."
We talk on the phone all the time. I'm like, "I live with you. How did I not know you're talking to Colin Quinn on the phone?" And then I met Colin a few more times after that. But I mean, no one's funnier than Colin Quinn. He's just an incredible genius.
Absolutely.
When it comes to comedy. And, I'm proud to say that I got a chance to meet him. I mean, if I met him now, him and Dave, not Dave Chappelle, Dave, the Jewish comedian who does late night. I just said his name a minute ago. Skanks for the Memories. Dave Attell.
Dave Attell. Yeah.
Dave Attell. Yeah. If I met him or Colin Quinn, I'd have to be like, I'm John DiResta's brother. They'd be like, you're the artist. Like they wouldn't know me straight away. They'd have to know me through like the memory of John. But those guys are just, those guys are big inspirations to me, for my what comedy timing I have. I definitely, I definitely steal from David. Like everybody steals from David.
He's one of the funniest people alive. So yeah, and it's
the one thing I learned from David Tell is to just be deadpan. When it just say something and then just say something and come to a complete stop. Don't apologize for it. Don't be like, don't explain it. If they don't get it, just move on. It's just simple shit like that.
Attell will also just calmly and relentlessly just hammer an audience with a punchline every 15 seconds for as long as he's on stage.
Absolutely.
To the point where like you're in pain in the crowd because you've just been laughing for an hour straight. Now he's
and he never lately I've been studying and I say studying as if I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm not, but I always think there's something to learn from stand-up comedy for what I do, and if it's presentation or if it's like physical comedy that I do with my silence. Rodney Dangerfield, like if you go back and watch,
there are some clips
appearances of Rodney with Johnny Carson, it's got to be some of the most incredibly genius, funny moments.
It's really amazing. And then almost all of that stuff, they pull out, it's 20, 30 years old. It's so dated. It doesn't even make sense. But there are some Dangerfield jokes where you could go out right now and it would be as funny or better than almost anything people are putting out. He 100%. Really is.
And his presentation, like if you watch Rodney closely, he never, ever laughs at his own jokes.
He doesn't even really smile on stage. He's just
his entire time. He's telling you what a miserable life he has.
Yep.
And as if he's in therapy. And it's unbelievably funny the way he does it. And then, lately Richard Pryor's been popping up on YouTube, and I've been following some old Richard Pryor stuff and how he could just immediately just devolve into a scenario. And like, you could see like the 4-part characterization he's doing of a room full of people. It's unbelievable how he just immediately goes into these things. And it's funny, like much like, obviously everyone says Dave Chappelle is like the way there's nothing between the art and the person,
Yeah.
Whereas when you see like I like Mark Maron, but when Mark Maron starts talking, he's got all this fog of anxiety and all this other bullshit, and his jealousies still come out when he interviews people. And so but like someone like Richard Pryor or Dave Chappelle, how it's just like the real person's just right there on the surface, like who they are is right there.
Yeah.
But when you see Rodney, who the hell knows who Rodney is? But he's still funny.
Like very few, because
you know what I mean? Who knows who the real Rodney is? Even apparently, like the people that really knew Rodney,
close friends are like, I don't know. Yeah,
who the hell knows who he is? I know he likes to be naked under a robe all the time for some reason. That's what I heard a lot.
That's a very common story I've heard. Is they were somewhere with Rodney where a robe was very inappropriate, and at multiple times it came open, and he didn't seem to care. Yeah. So you spend years in the city itself, and you have your workshop there and everything. And then a few years ago, you finally get out, because I assume, as we had mentioned, moving materials in and out of that area is probably...
Well, what happened to me was I was in a situation where I had to pay property tax at my rental, because one of they passed on some of the property tax to the tenants. I had a really cheap rent, but I also had to pay some of the property tax at the building.
Yeah.
And I had incurred a little bit of debt with them because I wasn't paying it, but they also weren't being pushy because they felt bad that they had to charge me because it came on like the 8th year of my lease.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I owed them a sizable amount of money, and they basically said, look, if you leave a year early, you don't have to pay us that money.
Got it.
Because, and I was like, that's a deal. So I left a year early from my lease, and I didn't have to pay them that money. And, so it was a win-win because they wanted the basement back. Yeah. And
they probably don't want a planer running 3 hours a day. And they're also...
Yeah, the tenants upstairs didn't like me. I mean, the minute we cracked the can of Bondo was spray painted stuff, they started banging on.
Oh, good God. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was a time for me to move on in my personal career. I needed to expand, and I had this house up here, but I didn't really know how to transition up here. But when I was under the gun, I was like, let's move upstate. I'll just rent something. And we found the rental that I'm in now. It's a 5,000 square foot place. I pay less than what I was paying for the little basement shop.
Right.
Location. And so being in the middle of nowhere, and then I rented this commercial space. It had one plug-in, one light bulb for 5,000 square feet because the prior life that the building had, it was disconnected from the grid because the tenants in there poisoned the water and everything. So the EPA came in and cut all the electric to the building so nobody could use it.
What do you live at the Love Canal? What do you live at the Love Canal?
Yeah. The place sat abandoned for 20 years, and they dug up all the dirt, and the EPA still comes and tests the water filtration system they put in there. They poisoned the ground with a solvent.
do you actually live by the Love Canal, or is it just something very similar to it? Yeah, like
no. It is an environmental hazard, but we don't have running water there. There's no,
No, I just know upstate New York, like that's where that actually was. So I didn't know if it was literally that. Yeah.
No. Yeah. This is just like on a much tinier scale. These guys contaminated the water table near there. And so they shut this factory down. And to make sure nobody went in there, they didn't want the owners re-renting it. They cut the electrical supply to the building. So when the new owner finally started recovering the building from abandonment, he put limited electric in certain spots. And so when I rented it, there hadn't been anybody in there for years. There was like hundreds of pounds of pigeon poop all over the floor. We had to rake and sweep up the pigeon poop, get the pigeons out, close a couple of holes. But there was no door on the back of it because all the teenage kids would go in there and drink beer. So there was no door. The door was there, but it was bent up and unsecurable.
That seems like a lot.
So
it must have been a pretty good deal on the rent.
I did. I got it. I got a good deal. Yeah. And so I put electric in, I fixed the door, I put a new overhead door in it. And, I'm still a renter there, and the landlord and I get along well. And now I have the shop in my backyard that I built in the meantime. And I thought I'd move everything in there, but it's not as big. The one in my backyard is kind of more of like a specialty spot. We teach classes in there, and now we're going to do this new TV project in there. So it's for all intents and purposes now, it's going to be a TV studio going forward for the next 4 months.
This is the giant black barn.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Which I mean,
it's about 500 feet through that wall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I've seen this week. It looks like you've been moving a lot in there, and that's specifically
getting ready for the show.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So that shop is going to be like the set for these shows we shoot.
Oh, is that why
we're going to shoot 8 episodes of a show in there?
All right. And is that also why something you had pointed out this week, you're like, all right, thank you, ShopBot, for this new gigantic table that you're going to let us borrow for a suspiciously short period of time. But now that makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Cool. Well.
Yep.
All right,
so they're going to give it to us. But I'm hoping that the show, at the end of the shoot, if it's good vibes, and it's like, man, that was a great run. Before even the edit gets done, we're going to be like, everyone's going to kind of have a feeling like, all right, this was cool. Maybe the edit could do better than what happened in real life. Yep. Or like, shit, we just captured magic.
Yep.
It's going to basically be like, don't anybody touch anything, because we're going to definitely get season 2.
Cool.
So we'll call up ShopBot and buy the machine from them. Something like that. Who knows? Nice. We'll see what happens.
Well, cool.
I won't.
Yeah.
The TV network will.
Hint, hint, guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So
who knows what's going to happen?
All right, cool. So you're shooting the show there. That's cool. Are they going to be testing everyone there 2-3 times a day, like all the other productions going on and everything? That's a good time.
We're going to get tested every other day, and we're going to kind of be in a bubble. I got one shot. I'll get my second shot in May.
Yep.
And so it's all good.
I assume that's going to take up a huge amount of your time, but
yeah. So videos are going to be limited supply. Since COVID hit, I was basically hitting just about once a week on videos.
Yeah.
I mean, I only missed 1 or 2 weeks in the last year. But now that COVID's here, well, that's not true. I went and did Making It season 3. I missed a few weeks there working in LA. And then going into this production, I'm definitely going to miss a few weeks for sure. I'll try and do the best I can.
Well, I mean, the payoff at the end is that you're going to have your material available in a slightly different format to a more dedicated 100%. Audience. I mean, it's I don't know. I mean, it's do you know, are you going to be fully out of like the production on the show, or are you going to be?
I am a producer on the show, so I do, and the other thing is it's such a collaborative effort, this version of a show, that everybody's going to, like, I just got a message, we're going to do a table round read, which is really just like, hey, okay, this thing we're going to build, like, who's going to take what responsibility? So that's going to happen in a couple days when everybody else gets here.
Are you excited to, or I guess, do you know if it's going to be more or less work? Because now it's not you filming, editing, and building and everything, or is the addition of a crew there?
It's going to be a tremendous amount of work, but what's good is, like, there's people here that are going to dress the set. They looked at my old shop. They're going to try and get some of my props and bring them over here. So like all like the minutia, I'm dealing with like certain things that only I can deal with, like setting the electric up in the barn and with my friend Patrick, and doing stuff that I deal with. And they're the ones running around setting up offices in the backyard, setting up their own specific internet, they bought 2 storage containers that have just plopped in my yard these last couple of days.
Okay.
So all the minutia of like getting tables, there's PAs running around here. If you want to see like somebody just burn money, get a TV production.
Cool.
Show near you.
Wow. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking your time, especially when you have a very busy week like this. Do you want to do just a few quick questions to take us out here?
Yeah, go for it.
Awesome, man. All right. So what would you say has been your favorite project that you've built maybe in the last couple of years?
That's always a hard question. When people say, what is your greatest work of art, so to speak, or your greatest accomplishment?
Maybe one where just at the end of it, you're just like, oh yeah, that came out even better than I thought. Or you're like, man, that was way less of a pain in the ass.
When people say what's your biggest accomplishment, I say my YouTube channel, because that's all really just me. I did 99.99% of everything myself. I occasionally had an editor, but like literally 5 times. I occasionally had a guy hanging the camera for me. That was Brett, my former assistant. He would occasionally do DP for me, but most of the time it's always me. But recently, the thing that comes to mind is like the knife in the heel of the shoe.
Oh,
did you see that video?
Yep.
Yeah. The shoe company contacted me and said, would you be interested in doing some like stuff for us? So to their credit, they analyzed my videos and said, every time you do a weapon or a knife, it does well. If we give you our boots, if you do a boot knife. So I did 1 boot knife for them, which went viral. And then they said, all right, do a second boot knife, but can you put the boot knife in the heel of the shoe? I was like, that's a fucking dumb idea.
Yeah. Well, when you started that video, I was just like, man, that's really cool that they wanted him to do like the sponsored thing, and he just routed out the heel of.
That was their idea.
All right. Well, that's what they want.
That was their idea, to take a $500 pair of boots and fucking
chop it to hell. But yeah, I mean, it's.
So, there's more to this than.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that was a video where like I went into it being like, okay, this is kind of hokey. And then when I came up with the idea to kind of have like this spur that like clicks and shuts it, like that thing that clicks up, and that was something that came about while I was in the middle of making the video. I was just going to have the knife just like friction fit in there. And then in my mind, it's like, there's no way I'm going to like walk around and it's going to stay in there.
Right.
It'll get lost. It'll get hooked on something. And then to do that little stylized spur thing that clicks up, like, then I was like, okay, this is hokey enough to be like, kind of like superhero-ish, like video game build, and still have like kind of a coolness, like in that little click, that emotional click when you pull the lock up and it snaps in place. People dig that type of shit. So
that's cool.
So that was one recently that came out better than I expected.
How frequently do you end up like scrapping projects, or you get partway through a video and you're just like, this isn't going to work?
Not very, very often. I mean, if I start to film everything because you just don't know where it goes. I might have like, if I made 500 videos in the last 10 years, I might have like started and not finished maybe 10.
Okay.
So
and it's pretty good rate. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I have them, and occasionally they might end up in a vlog. I'll be like, hey, I'm working on this. And so it's segment of like the beginning of something, and then I'll never bring it back up again. And people will be like, what happened to that thing you started to show the video? I'm like, it went off the rails.
Yeah.
Or, it was something that didn't have a deadline, so I just kind of faded on it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. The last thing I wanted to ask you, and this is a personal interest thing, but I've seen this in the back of your videos a couple times. You own like a green Vespa.
Mm-hmm.
And after over 10 years of wanting one, I finally got one a few weeks ago, and I was just kind of wondering what the story is with yours.
Oh, it's actually a good story. So in 2001, a buddy of mine bought a brand new Vespa. Like Vespa kind of came out of nowhere with like all new styles.
Yeah.
And so my buddy bought a little, I guess it was a 50cc Vespa, and he had it for like 2 months. And he says, I want a real motorcycle.
Okay.
So I bought the Vespa from him.
Yep.
I bought it, probably, I guess I bought it September. Actually, I bought it like 2 weeks after September 11th.
I was going to say September 2001. What was going on around that?
Yeah, I bought it. I bought it because so September 11th.
Yeah.
And then my brother's 40th birthday was September 15th. And that day I took money out of the bank to buy the Vespa.
Yeah.
And I bought the Vespa, and with no registration or insurance, I drove it to my brother's birthday party in Midtown.
Okay.
And everyone came outside to see the Vespa at my brother's birthday party.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a weird time in New York because people were having birthday parties, but people died.
Yeah.
So the Vespa, I had the Vespa for a while. I kind of beat it into the ground. And then another funny story. So I beat it to death. Like it was like every time I got on, I was like, I don't know if it's going to work or not. But it always ran, but it was really scratched up from this knocking over in the city. It was just beat to hell. And there was a Vespa GT 250 that was like pristine. But every time I walked by it, it was laying down. Like somebody locked it and never, ever used it. So it was locked on the other side of my block. I would walk my dogs in a circle around my block. And it was at a doorman building, locked to the front awning, always down. So occasionally I'd stand it back up just out of respect for other motorcycles. Like someone's going to drive over this thing, literally like on its side, because it would fall into the gutter and then I'd stand it back up. And then one day I went into the doorman. I was like, here's my card. Could you please tell the guy who owns that Vespa, ask him if he wants to sell it. I got a call the next day. Hey, is this Jimmy, the guy who wants my Vespa? I was like, yeah. He goes, this is your lucky day. I go, oh, what do you want for it? He goes, I hated that thing since the day I bought it. He goes, it's been an albatross on my neck. You could have it for $500. This is
nice.
It had like 1,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
It was a 2005 GT5 250.
Right. Yeah.
And nearly perfect condition, except for all the scars from laying on its side.
I just bought a GT 300, and I can assure you they've cost much more than $500 now.
Yeah, probably you probably paid about $5,000 for it at least, right?
Oh, coming up on double that. Yeah.
Oh, really? Brand new? You bought a brand new one?
It's the 300. It's their biggest one that isn't like an extreme special edition.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
wow.
It was something I wanted for a long time, and that's why I waited so long. But yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So I put my other one in storage. Ultimately, I sold it to a friend, my 50cc, and I kept the 250, and I still have it. And that is also beat to hell. It got stolen, and I recovered it with all broken parts. So when I brought it to the Vespa dealer, I said, they go, how do you want to fix it? Do you want it perfect? I said, just fix it with whatever you have in the house. I don't care what the color is. So they replaced the panels with whatever parts they had. That's how it is today.
Was that a terrifying nightmare to drive around the streets of Manhattan, or was it actually pleasant? Because it seems like it could go either way.
No, it was great. The scariest part about riding the Vespa in Manhattan is coming to a stop at a red light and then hearing the guy behind you skidding. That is like terrifying.
Yeah.
So occasionally, like if the guy behind me was tailgating me, I would just like pull into the side and stop and let him go in front of me. But on occasion, you're not always paying attention, and you're driving and you just stop at the red light, and all of a sudden you hear, and then I look behind me and just gas it to like kind of go into the intersection a little bit to alleviate the rear end hit. I never did get hit in the rear end, and there was the only Vespa incident I had where I fell or crashed was I was driving in Midtown. It was around Christmas, where it's always packed. Midtown is packed. I was driving down 53rd Street in the direction towards the Museum of Modern Art, crossing Fifth Avenue. There's a big church on the corner of Fifth Avenue, and there's millions of people.
Yeah.
And so I have the green light, but they're all crowding the crosswalk to cross the street waiting for. So as soon as I drive through, they're all going to go against the light and cross from one side to the other. So I'm driving and I blast my horn because they see, oh, it's a Vespa. He only needs like 3 feet of space to go through. And there's 100 people on this side and 100 people on that side, slowly closing the gap.
Good God.
And I hit the horn, like, get out of my way. You don't have the light to cross. And so I'm like waving my hand and I'm doing like 25 miles an hour. And with that, at the very last second, a Japanese tourist, a cute little girl, tries to cross the street in front of me. And I just plow into her.
Good God.
I fall. She shoots across the road.
Oh,
my bike spins out. I get up, and everybody, there must have been 300 people in the intersection. They're like, like she gets up and she starts doing this like praying, bowing thing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. Right? I just got smacked by a Vespa.
And I had on a shoe birth helmet. I don't know if you know what a shoe birth helmet is. You can't take it off your head unless you open up the bottom. So it closes around your neck. It's like great for winter because it literally grabs your neck. you can't take it off unless you pull the chin latch and open it up.
Okay.
So I had my shoe birth helmet on and I forgot to open it. And in anger, I try to pull it off my head and I can't pull it off my head because it's locked. And I'm yanking it slowly and my head is slowly coming out of it like it's being born out of like the neck hole. And I pull it off and I start screaming at the crowd. It took me probably like an agonizing 15 seconds to pull the helmet off over my fat head. And then I start screaming, go, you motherfuckers. I wouldn't have fallen if you all weren't in the fucking crosswalk. Fucking obey the lights, you motherfuckers. Started screaming. And then the girl.
None of them are ever coming back to New York again, regardless.
In the middle of screaming, I just stop and I turn to the girl. I go, are you okay? And she goes, I'm sorry. I said, are you okay? Do you need an ambulance? Are you okay? She said, I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm okay. She was so embarrassed. And then I just said, fuck all of you. And then I got in the Vespa
to go.
And rode away.
Yeah. Time to go really fast. Get out of that.
No police, no ambulance. The girl insisted she was okay. And that was it. So that's my only Vespa story.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was a much better story than I was expecting. So thank you for sharing
another funny story, and then we can end on this.
Yeah.
So I'm getting on my Vespa one day, and some guy goes, "Is this yours?" I go, "Yeah." It was in front of my apartment. He goes, "This is yours." I go, "Yeah." I go, "Why?" He goes, "Because the other day I was walking by here, and a woman knocked it over, and there was a young kid here on the street that said, 'Yo, you knocked over my Vespa.'" And the woman gets out of the car and she's like, "I'm so sorry." He goes, "Give me $50.
Oh, wow.
And she gave him $50.
Yeah.
He stood the Vespa up and she got in the car, drove away, and he walked away. I said, "Oh, good on him."
I wonder how many times he made that work. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a funny New York story.
Cool, man. Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, bro. Thank you.
Everyone, go check out the DiResta YouTube channel. What else? Watch Making It on NBC and
this new thing you'll hear all about.
This new secret show that's coming out at a time undetermined. So
probably be at the end of the year.
Cool.
We're making it now.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And
all right, dude. Let's stay in touch.
Cool. Have a good weekend.